Welcome to the Revenue Builders Podcast, a weekly show featuring B2B sales leaders and executives. Hosted by five-time CRO John McMahon and Force Management co-founder John Kaplan, the show goes behind the scenes with the people who have been there, done that, and seen the results. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe, rate, and review the show to help us reach more people. Revenue Builders is brought to you by Force Management. We help companies improve sales performance, executing the growth strategy at the point of sale. Find us at forcemanagement.com. Enjoy today's episode.
Hey, Chaz, I'd like to start by discussing recruiting and interviewing. So you said that you believe in a hiring process that's focused on behavioral traits. Let's talk a little bit about why that's important to you and why it's maybe should be important to a lot of people.
Hiring to me is probably the most critical aspect of my job. And having those traits really carries you throughout your career. We can all land in great companies and have great leaders, but in the end, it's on you. Everything about that opportunity is on you. You can't point fingers. You can't blame the product. You can't blame leadership, market timing, the competition, whatever. When you are engaged in an opportunity, it is the traits that separates you from your competition. Sure, we might have a better use case alignment. We might be better suited for a specific outcome, or we have a specific feature or function that separates you. But in the end, that buyer wants to know that they can trust you, because it's not just about what happens before, but it's what happens after the sale as well. So for me, and our team, it's really important that we know what you're going to do when things go sideways, because they do, and they always do. And if you think otherwise, you're making a mistake. So turn off the happy ears, get real with yourself and the opportunity and the people that you're working with. And there's not a better way to learn or understand what a person's going to do when they get knocked down. So when it comes to interviewing and recruiting, we really try not to, we challenge our candidates. We challenge them in the process that we bring forward. We challenge them in the questions that we ask. We challenge them even in the process itself. It can be lengthy and arduous for some, and many self-select out. But that trait, what are you doing when you get punched in the face? How are you going to respond? Are you going to hide in the corner? Are you going to call me? Are you going to call your manager? Are you going to ask for help? And those things, I think, can be discovered with the right types of questions. It's really easy for a candidate today to go to Google or ChatGPT and get a good set of questions.
Right.
That's what they expect. So, not doing that.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you that recruiting as a leader, that defines whether or not you're going to be successful. So I always find it really strange when some people want to turn recruiting over to HR solely and they don't want to be involved in it, because whoever you have on the team is going to essentially define your success or failure on your team. And then traits, I agree with you, the skills, knowledge, what they did in their career experience or resume. But to me, the behavioral traits are most important, because that's what you find out 6 months after you hired somebody. You find out the behavioral traits that they had. And then you realize, I made a mistake, or I really made a great hire. So given that, talk a little bit about some of the key traits that are important to you when you are interviewing someone.
Yeah, I think it starts with the company values. Not every company has the same or shares the same values. I think we could probably agree that universally they would apply to any organization, but I think a company, especially an early stage company, has a very unique character and is seeking very unique values in their employees, because it really embodies why the founder started the company, not just from a product perspective and the solution that they want to bring to market, but what type of organization do you really want to be? So in the organization that I work for today, it's teamwork, it's ownership, it's care, it's communication, and it's innovation. And we look for that in every single touch point along the interview process, from basic introductions to talking to the person that runs customer success to, the role play that we do more or less at the end. So we try to discover each one of those values. And in those values, you can uncover specific traits like so you're a team player. Well, what does that really mean as a team player? What types of traits are you bringing to the table to support and embody and deliver teamwork across the sales organization and the company as a whole? So, we look for very specific things when it comes to, ownership. I just mentioned teamwork, but let's go right to ownership because it's my favorite of the 5. And by the way, I have my own that I add to it. So little asterisks for the sales team.
I'd love to hear those for the sales team.
Well, yeah, it's speed. We talk about urgency, okay, but speed. I love speed. Do everything fast. I think prospects like that. But anyway, going back to ownership, it seems like a very an obvious question to ask a candidate that is high performant, has great numbers on their resume, top performer, President's Club, 120%, 150% of plan. Fantastic. And we love to talk about that. That's the easy one. That's the one they're expecting you to ask.
Right.
Tell me about the time when you lost the deal. And then do not interrupt. Just let them answer. And I usually will infuse with, tell me more. I don't lead the witness. You got to be really careful when interviewing people because it's super easy to lead the witness by just giving them clues as to what you're looking for.
That's a good point.
I don't want to disclose that in any way. Tell me more. That's it. And see where it goes. And the longer they take to answer the question, the more that they will reveal about their character and the traits that I may be looking for in that person. And
so in that one question, you might discover more than one of their behavioral traits, is what you're saying.
I think that's a much better way to put it, John. Precisely. Right. I'm going to discover.
What about the one where you said something goes sideways? So like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So
yes.
What do you try to uncover to see what's going to happen when something goes sideways, whether it's a deal or customer implementation? What trait are you trying to find there?
Are you calm, cool, and collected? Cliche as it is, it really matters, especially when we're doing everything over Zoom, at least the lion's share of what we're doing. If you display any type of panic, rush decision, guesswork, it compromises you should be a subject matter expert, a consultant when you're in these opportunities. And I'm talking specifically about large enterprise sales, not PLG.
Right.
Right. That person on the other end of the phone is looking for cues, always. And what's their motive? What are they going to do? How are they going to respond? Are they my champion? Are they going to fight for me on the other side of the fence? So, uncovering these specific traits, especially when things go wrong, are really, really important because I'll learn through that back and forth in that process if they're going to call me right away, or they're going to wait 3 days, are they going to wait 5 days? Or are they going to call somebody else, which is fine, get somebody else's opinion. But the buck technically stops with me. So just tell me, let's go. What's the bad news? Put it on the table, and together we figure out what our play is.
Yeah. Well, talk about, let's say, why don't we pick the top 3? There's a lot of traits in what you described, your company values and also some of the other key traits. But what would you say are the top 3 that you absolutely have to have? If you narrowed it down, you can only have 3.
Number 1 is hard work.
Okay.
Being working 24 hours a day.
Let's give them to me first, then we'll go back to them. So hard work. What's the other 2?
Are you curious?
Curious. Okay.
And are you a team player?
Okay. Let's go through them then.
And it's tough.
Hard work. How do you uncover hard work? How would you do that?
So, by the way, it's hard for me to put those in order. Just
okay. All right.
It's really hard.
They don't have to be 1, 2, 3, but they're the top 3.
I say them out loud. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. No, number 3 should be number 1. That's kind of like where my brain went after I had said that. But for hard work, and we had a candidate do this today. They deliver a presentation to a panel. I mean, it's very common in our profession to do that.
Yeah.
But what we ask is that they actually present our solution back to us, not what they're currently representing, but ours. So that makes it a little bit more difficult. And we provide little to no information to them at all. Like the website is the library. Go to the library. It's all there. Go find it. And by the way, if you want to take steps outside of the process you have with me to learn more about what we're looking for, fine. Like use whatever means you want to use to learn as much as you can about us and our customers and our outcomes. And that really presents itself. We don't give templates. We don't give any guidance. Maybe a small little snippet from an SDR. When an inbound lead comes in, they capture a couple of banned questions, maybe, probably not even banned at this point because we kind of changed it a little bit, but we give them very little information. And within that 30-minute window, we learn a lot about hard work. Did they, create discovery questions that are specific to the nucleus value proposition? Did they go out and learn and understand about existing customers? Did they read the case studies? Did they go to the videos that they have? Heck, have they even taken a look at some of the technical artifacts that we publish, white papers, tech briefs, maybe even documentation? Candidate we had today shocked me. And I literally mean shocked me. I have not seen a candidate in, I'd say, 4 months in the search for this territory where someone took that time and energy. I would say I could put that person up against someone that's been here for 6 months or a year, and they'd probably do just as well in that discovery and that presentation of our solution. So it's a lot of work, but the ones that really do it well and are thoughtful and take the time, it stands out.
Yeah. Well, in that hard work, you talked about diligence. They put the time in. You said energy. But once you do all that hard work and diligence and everything, you have to put it together in a comprehensive and simple way for people to understand, which sounds like this person did. That talks a lot about their intellect also. One, they can actually go out and get the information. That's kind of hard work. Two, you got to assimilate all that information. You got to make sense of it, and then you have to be able to articulate it. There's many different stages there.
Oh, and you have to be curious. Massively curious, right? You can't just stop at, a one sentence answer, because we're going to ask you a lot of questions, not stump the chump. We're not about that at all. But we want to know that you've poked around, that you've looked at these use cases, that you truly understand what's driving that use case and that outcome. And those that can put that together succinctly in under 30 minutes, they can create new slides if they want to. Most of them do, and present it, without a sales engineer. Obviously, you're running solo in front of 4 or 5 people that certainly know more about the product than you do, and you remain calm, cool, and collective.
Yes, that's difficult.
It is very difficult,
and they know the subject matter probably better than you do.
But that happened today. And why we have our Slack channel going during the presentation. Derek, why would you ask that question? I have no idea what the answer to that question is. Derek's like, Chaz, don't worry. Just wait, see where this goes. I was like, okay, Derek. And lo and behold, what we discovered in that question to the candidate, we would expect the candidate to say, look, I don't know. Let me get back to you. That's the basic thing. But he said, look, I know I don't know the full answer, but I'm going to give you what I do know. We were like, wait a minute. So he did take that one extra step. He was curious enough to go one step further, right? So I'm like, okay, here's an AE that if in a situation, whether it's at a trade show, a VAR event, has to do a first meeting solo, can hold his ground, despite whether it's a C-level or someone that's day-to-day, right? And that, I really appreciate that in the candidate. It's not just enough to regurgitate a 30-second elevator pitch, but understand it enough to be valuable and to have an opinion, right?
Yeah, I encourage the interviewer and the interviewee to consider this statement. you are a walking audition for what it's going to be like. If you're a salesperson and you're interviewing, you're a walking audition for what you're going to be like as a seller. If you are a sales leader, you are a walking audition for what it's going to be like to be led by you. And so I think that I work with a lot of people who are getting ready to do an interview, or people that are getting ready to, on either side of it. And I always say that to them. I say, you're a walking audition. And I think what comes out of your mouth and the way that you handle yourself is exactly what people are going to expect on what they're going to get. That is what they are. They're not interpreting your resume. They're not interpreting, they're interpreting how you handle yourself during that interview. And before this, like when we're picking these character traits, I think it's really, really important that it's not done at a singular level. So like whatever they are, you called them, Chaz, you called them cultural, I think you called them cultural traits, or cultural values. Those have to be shared amongst the entire company. And we have to have agreement on, okay, what does that, so like, let's say it's hard work. Okay, what does that mean for us in our company? Hard work in our company looks like something, because everybody has their own definition of what hard work is. And we want to make sure that when we spot, we know exactly when we see it. We know exactly when we spot it. So that takes some preparation before we even get those candidates engaged. We're like, okay, what is hard work? What is hard work is the competency, let's say, or the trait. What does that look like in action? And how would we measure that? I think that's really, really important, because somebody could say, well, yeah, that guy, that person, she's a hard worker. And another person could say, well, how do we know that? I didn't hear anything that was like whether she was a hard worker or not. So it's really, really important to whatever those are, that everybody agrees with them and they map for our company.
These are really excellent points, Cap. What you call it, an audition?
Yeah, walking audition.
I got to use that word. I'm sure you've all encountered this, where you have the best candidate on paper. You look at their background and it's really incredible, right? They come highly recommended from references, or maybe a recruiter, internal referral. Everything's lining up. And then they get to that last step and they come in with a little bit of swagger. Like, hey, I know what I'm doing. I've done this before. You should just do what I go along with it, Chaz. And it's very hard in those situations when you know you've got someone that has the track record, but isn't treating it like an audition. What we see is laziness.
Totally.
And to your point about, is everyone on the same page about how we measure these certain skills, or rather these traits? We'll get to skills later, I'm sure. But on the trait side, and I even said it on our team call today, look, all of you are going through a bunch of interviews right now with a whole load of candidates. I said, remember, and we have a score sheet. Everyone fills out the score sheet. How did they rank? Is that higher, no higher? What's your, we do all of that. But it always comes back to, you've got the notebook, teamwork, ownership, care, communication, and innovation. That's what you're interviewing for. And ask it any way you want. Like, tell me about a hard time in your life. What did you do? Right? Tell me about a time you lost a deal and it was because of the product. What did you do? Was it really because of the product? Like, that is woven in to everything that we do, not just hiring, but other aspects of our business as well, and our team. But, kudos to our founders for just drilling that since day one in the 31 months that I've been here.
So Chaz, that's just not an interview template of character traits. That then becomes the way that you onboard people. So what does teamwork mean at where we are in our company? That's also how you coach and develop people. That's how you assess people. That's how you promote and demote people. That becomes kind of a master record of not just sourcing traits, but traits that will be used consistently throughout your entire life cycle or tenure with that company. I think that's really important, because a lot of times companies say, okay, we hire for this and then we assess for that. or we coach and develop for this, or we promote and delegate, or we promote and relegate for these reasons. And I think it's really confusing for a culture. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense to me. Part of what we do here is, 30 day, 60 day, 90 day, reviews when you first get started, of course. And there's we get send out a questionnaire to the employee and to the manager, and they do an assessment. But it always ends with, what's your score on those 5 values?
Yeah.
And for us, if you're in any type of position for some sort of merit increase, compensation, stock, whatever it is, if you don't score a 5 out of 5 on those 5 values, it's not happening.
I love that.
It's not happening. I wish I could take credit for that. I can't. It's the founders. It's really great that they do that. It makes the conversations very, very constructive. Yeah, Chaz, but I crushed my number in Q2. Look at all the pipeline I generated. Well, look at how many meetings I did. Blah, blah, blah. Great. I'm proud of you. But you are not measuring up on ownership. And when you do not do that, that has a ripple effect across the team and across the different departments, which, by the way, I have to have a great relationship with. So if you undermine that relationship that I have with product and you need a feature by, February 5th, what are you doing? Right? I mean, pull yourself back in. So yes. Yeah.
I want to go back though, Chaz and Cap, to that person that came into the challenge that you had, and you said they had swagger and just didn't put the effort in because they thought what I think I heard is they basically know it all. And you called it laziness. And actually, I've seen that movie before multiple times. And what to me, if I'm hearing it right, it's really that the person is not coachable and they're not going to be adaptable. They think they know it all. I know everything. You're not going to be able to coach me on everything. You got to take it for what I say, that this is right and this is how I sell. So what happens is, as your company grows and as the product changes, the market changes, the customers change, the competition changes, and you try to coach that person, they're not coachable. So, and when they're not coachable, they're not adaptable. And that same person that you might hire now, they might sell pretty good for 1.5 to 2 years, in my experience. And then 2 years later, you're going to look at them and go, everything's changed. That person hasn't changed at all. They're a dinosaur. And then you have to get rid of them. Seen that movie so many times.
And unfortunately, I've learned that lesson. And the consequences are major.
Yeah.
I
don't think it's actually laziness. Well, you could tie it to laziness, but it's really that they think they know everything already. And they're not coachable, not adaptable. I agree with that, Ken.
No, I agree with it. And what can happen, and it's happened to me, is when you have one of those people in your organization, and let's say they're performing, I find that I can try to cover for them, right? Because maybe it's someone I worked with before. Maybe it's a very well-known quantity, highly regarded. And I find myself trying to fill in those gaps that they have on the values, which you could probably get away with for a very short period of time.
Right.
What will happen is your team or other departments will discover these things. And then they start asking questions about you. Like, why is Chaz accepting this? And Chaz tells me one thing, but I see another.
Yeah. Why does, and then they ask the question, why does Chaz not see what we see? Which really undermines your leadership.
Done. I'm cooked.
Yeah.
Cooked.
Yeah. John, I think that this point is so critical, this adaptability and the ability to handle change. I think what happens when people are going to other companies, I've always found, I think you're onto something really, really big. Because if I show myself as adaptable, this is some unfortunate thinking. If I show myself as adaptable, if I show myself as being able to handle change, in some weird way, it shows a weakness that I don't know what I should know. So I'm going to put myself in a position of appearing like I know exactly what somebody is asking me at all times. And I've watched this movie a lot when people, especially today, when people move from company to company. And it's easier to do that today than it was back in the day, 30 years ago. If you were moving every 2 years in a career, that was a problem. Today, it's kind of an expectation. There's no judgment. That's just how a lot of people do that today. But what I feel is, here's what I see down the road. What I see down the road is that I ask questions like, give me an example. I'm the interviewer. Give me an example of where you felt like your company didn't trust you. And that is a great question, because I can back my way into these situations where the answers that they give me was more about they were protecting maybe what they didn't know. And they didn't really feel comfortable and open enough to receive coaching. When I was coaching, I always like to say this: look, it's not a problem not to know. Because when people would fight me, I'd say, look, it's not a problem not to know, but it is a crime punishable by death not to be doing anything about it.
Yeah, not to ask.
Right. So I just wanted to make that point that you said, John, it can show up as things like micromanagement. It can show up in things like trust. If you have any employees right now going into the new year and they're telling you I don't, giving you feedback like, I don't think that you trust me, or there's micromanagement going on, dig into that, because that's a double-edged blade. It's a double-edged blade. There could be some things that you are doing that are causing them to say that. But oftentimes I also find that there are things that people are unwilling to divulge, or just a bad comfort level. And it's so much wasted heat in that manager-employee relationship where you're like fighting with an individual. You're trying to help them, and they're just constantly trying to buffer you so they don't have to talk about what they don't know. I think it's
and I don't even know what that is, because I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or anything. But sometimes I wonder if they have some sort of issue, whether it's insecurity, or they have to be in control, or they have to know, or what it is that some people are not coachable. They just don't. Or they take the coaching and they take it 3 times, the same coaching, and you really put a lot of time in them, and they never change.
Yeah.
You don't have that. That's why I think coachability and adaptability go together, because, well, number one, you have to be coachable. Then if you're coachable, now you actually have to have the courage to look in the mirror and say, I need to change. I need to adapt. And now you actually have to go through the motions of adapting. And for some people, that could be fearful. They could be scared of that.
Well, Johnny, it's like, when you think about it, there's people that spend a long period of time to figure out how to get a groove or to get a motion.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw this in athletics, like the people that didn't want to learn a different way to do something because they knew how hard it was to get to the level that they were at. But I also found those same individuals were the ones that really didn't reach their ceiling because they figured that they were at a point that they were at their kind of like their best level. And then they kind of protected their best level. And I always found that those people really never met their potential. It's the people that were fantastic athletes or fantastic sellers. And it also bounces up against some of these other character traits like curiosity. Curiosity is also related to this conversation. Those people that aren't adaptable and those people that aren't coachable sometimes are auditioning in the same way as not being curious, because they don't want to get into that dialogue about what would be different than we're already talking about.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I've seen the movie. I'm with you, Ken.
Really, really.
I'm picking up what you're dropping down.
Yeah, really important. I have somebody that I love that I've worked with for a long, long time. And I know that when they pull the trust card on me and they do it, and I know that that's their last resort with me when they're feeling like they're getting pushed to a limit that they're uncomfortable with. It used to drive me nuts. I used to be like, how many times are you going to ask me if I trust you or not? Like, it pisses me off. However, I realized that what they were really saying is, I'm really at my wall of my ability to adapt or change in the situation. So I really just, and they don't even know it. They want you just to back off. And so then, because this is about getting intimate, John, it's past the interview process, but it's going to show up later. Because by the way, that person had that trait 20 years ago when I first met them, and they still have that trait now. The difference
always shows up later.
Yeah, the difference is I'm
things you missed in the interview process will show up 6 months later.
I know them well now. And so it's my job as the leader to know, okay, when that card gets pulled, for example, on the trust card, it doesn't piss me off. I know that I am pushing them to a comfort level, and I just bring it out. I just ask them, like, what do you, we just get to the point there. But so I like where this conversation is going, because if we don't start with the things that Chaz is talking about, we never really know what people's inner workings are. And we never really know, like you say, it's going to show up later on. It's a great opportunity to find that out in the beginning, so you know exactly what you're dealing with. And we all have them. We all have our little idiosyncrasies or our little, as a matter of fact, when I do, I love this one. When I do reference calls, like, people don't do reference calls anymore. I'm like, what do you mean you don't do reference calls? Well, they're only
one today. I did one today. Absolutely.
They say they're only going to give you a good reference. I'm like, I take everyone as an opportunity, and I call and I say, hey, they'll say, hey, I'm calling for a reference for Chaz. And they give me a reference for Chaz. It's a glowing reference, blah, blah, blah. And I say, yeah, we love Chaz too. That's why I'm calling. Like, now, give me an example of an area of opportunity where you've worked with Chaz before in the past, and it was an area of opportunity where you could really help him grow and develop. And what you're really asking for is, what does Chaz struggle with?
Right.
How can I help Chaz? And I'm telling you, these same references that are willing to glowingly tell you everything about Chaz, they love Chaz. And if you ask it in a way as, how can I help Chaz be successful? They're going to tell you about something that Chaz struggles with. I found that to just be...
That's a great one.
It's a lost art, Johnny. Most people don't check references anymore.
I'm I'm on the boards of companies, and I've been the CRO with people that work directly for me. And I see that they get hired, and I know the person that was on the board or the CEO or something. They never even call. And I'm like, wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Sorry, Chaz, you said you did 2 today.
Yeah, I did 1 today, but I asked the candidate for 2. And I just asked an even more direct question of that reference. What do they need to work on? Just tell me, and you usually get something that's very usable, right? And when you call back the candidate, said, hey, I taught you 2 references. What do you think about A, B, or C? Whatever it was that reference said you needed to work on. And there I'll yet again discover something new about the character of that candidate. Oh yeah, you know what? That is something I've been working on, and I still need to close the gap. Here's where I think I'm at. I'm like, good. He's thinking about it. He's got situational awareness or self-awareness. I'm like, I can work with that. So,
yes, and let me tell you where else it's going to show up in your hard work. Like, if you just wait 24 hours, the hard worker is going to already call that reference and say, how did it go? And that person that gave the reference is going to be scratching their head a little bit and go, well, it was great. I get there was something that came up, though. And they asked me about this. And I told them the time that you were totally freaked out about the comp plan and you almost quit. But we talked about it in a way that was really positive for you. And so when you go to follow up with that candidate about the reference, now you've got another opportunity. Like, that's hard work. It's not like people just blowing that off. It amazes me.
Can I have 4, John?
Yeah.
No, I was just thinking on the traits.
Yeah, go for it.
As Cap goes through this, obvious component of all of this is patience.
Yes.
And I think when you think about the pressure that you can get from above, like Chaz, you've had this open head count. It can't be that hard. It can't be. The market is full. There's all these, there's great people out there. It can't possibly be that hard to find someone. It can't take that long. I'm like, well, contraire. I'm in like patience. Patience is crucial in all of this because when you take your time and you slow down, the more that candidate talks or speaks, they're going to show their true colors as things progress and you go through all these stages. That's why the first step for me, I just have an introductory call. Like, can I have a conversation with you? And does it feel comfortable?
Yeah. Now, what happens, Chaz, if you hire the guy that came in with the swagger, theoretically, and maybe you've even seen this in your experience in the past, the person is an A player. It's pretty obvious. They can sell. You're an early stage startup, let's say. You're just looking to get bookings at this stage.
Yes.
Not like you're adding 50, sales reps a quarter.
No.
So what happens if you hire that A player, but that A player isn't the right match for your company's culture as you outlined? What happens?
You're having a very uncomfortable conversation with your manager, usually the COO or the CEO. And I do not like that conversation. It's borderline embarrassing to have that conversation because
why? Because they uncovered some of the culture issues or compatibility.
They uncovered most likely the character traits that you already knew about that you were playing cover up for.
Yeah. And
it's painful. And you have to come clean. Say, yes, I knew it. I saw it. I ignored it. They got to their number early, well before the end of the year or whatever the fiscal period is. And I figured that production could cover up any warts, for lack of a better term, but it doesn't. And what will happen, in early stage, the founders are still, at least for me, I make not a requirement, but I ask that there's like, you don't pass the torch from founders-led sales to sales. I believe that true founders should always be a part of, in some way, shape, or form, the sales process. So what can happen is there can be a meeting that you're not a part of, and your direct report is there with the CEO, and that character trait presents itself. Your boss is like, "Are you kidding me? You what? Like that's off. That's not good ground to be standing on." Unfortunately. I've learned that.
All right. So let's say, what did you have? Let's call them 5 key character traits. And the person has 4.5. It's the end of the interview. Do you sit down with yourself or with the team and say, what's the risk in hiring this person? And can we, to use your terminology before, can we cover for that half a character trait that's missing?
So the answer to the question is, if you're 4.5, you don't get hired. Now it's not easy to come to that conclusion.
Right.
Because we do make the decision. I could override. I could, but that doesn't foster teamwork. So if we've discovered something, they're super close, but they're not quite there. Now, I think it matters, John, on what it is what the gap is, right? If we've got these 5 character traits that we're looking for, and that trait has been recognized by the candidate, maybe in the reference call, or we talk about the engagement, how well it went and how well it did, or what didn't go well, and they can stand up and say, maybe even before you ask them, because this has happened, hey, I didn't do a good job on that. I really didn't. Can I do it again? Or this is why it happened. I think that context matters. And I'm trying to think back and, all the hires, have we made a concession because we understood what the gap was? We agreed that it could be addressed, coachable, right? Mm-hmm. And it wasn't going to be a concern. But as a first response, if you're not a 5 on the 5, we're not going to do it. And we'll just, interview one more candidate. It's like, okay, let's interview one more candidate.
Be patient. So I want to talk about this because this is the underlying chant in my gut. and I learned this under you, Johnny, at PTC, is that recruiting is not an event. It's a process.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm going to add an adjective. It's a never ending.
Never ending.
It's a constant process.
And when we're talking about recruiting, I just want people to understand this. The best hires that we've ever hired are the not in play players. And what I mean is they're working. They're working and producing in another company.
Yeah.
And the likelihood of you getting them out of that company in 2 weeks or what have you, because you haven't been recruiting and you got to fill an open position. All this stuff we're talking about, throw it out the window for most companies. They're just like trying to get people to fill roles. But the people, if you're a leader and you're listening to this, the best leaders I ever worked for started off on a forecast call. And the first question on the forecast call was, how many interviews did you do this week? And I was like, and I was all ready to defend my number and talk about my number and talk about the big deals. I was so ready to go. And they said, how many interviews did you do this week? And I was like, well, none. And they said, well, why none? And I said, well, I don't have any open headcount. And that was the kiss of death. That was the kiss of death. And what I learned was...
That's when you got hit with an overhand right.
That's right. What I learned, the best thing I ever learned about recruiting was the rule of 3. Whoa. You should be recruiting for 3 people always. For 3 people, you should have in your pipeline 3 people. I was like, why? Well, somebody's going to get promoted. Because if you're not getting people promoted in your organization, you're not working in a growing organization, then you're not growing, you're dying. So,
and that person you're promoting is typically the best AE on the team.
Right.
So you're going to lose, if you have 5 people, you're going to lose your best person to a promotion.
You better be.
If the company's growing. Company's growing, you're going to lose your best person constantly to promotions.
That's number 1. Number 2, somebody's going to get demoted. Somebody's going to get taken out. Somebody's going to get reassigned, or God forbid, we can use the word fired. Somebody's going to get fired or moved out of the business. Doesn't make them bad people. It just means we're growing and we're constantly upgrading our talent.
Well, the average, enterprise software company has around 25% churn.
That's right. Now
that churn is between losing reps that go out the door and losing reps to promotions.
Yeah. Then number 3, and I bet you all 3 of us on this podcast, all 3 of us have been in this category. Somebody's going to surprise you.
Yes.
Something's going to happen. Something's going to happen with their family. Something's going to happen in their life. Something's going to happen that is totally out of control of the situation that you're managing. And they're just going to go. They just got to go.
I made sales calls. I'll tell you a story. I made sales calls with a guy named JD. I won't say his last name. His dad was a football coach. His brother was a football coach. He played, D1 and then went pro. And it was a great rep. I made a ton of sales calls with him. We'd go out at night and, go to dinner afterwards and go to the basketball games and hockey games and stuff like that. And one day he walks in my office, totally surprises me, says, I got a job with the Denver Broncos and I'm quitting. And I was floored. I thought I was really close to this guy. We shared so much stuff, but he kept that in the background. Was I surprised? No, I was shell-shocked.
Yeah.
Shell-shocked. And that left a big gap on the team that I had to try to fulfill, because at that stage of the company, he was the only person in that territory because we were, like a raw startup.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you think about if you're dealing with the rule of 3, and I can think of guys, Peter Schmidt, I'm thinking about some guys in Germany, Peter Schmidt, Christopher Rummel, I don't want to alienate anybody. I can list a bunch of names. These are people that took me months, 7 months at least. One of them took a year to recruit. I got a guy on force management staff right now, Brian Walsh, took me 10 years to recruit this guy to force management. He's one of the best people at what he does in the world at what he does. And I knew he was going to be, but he was a not in play player. And so I just want to make sure that kind of comes across. A lot of times people get out their pad of paper and they're talking about, okay, this is what I do for recruiting. And if you don't have it as a mindset, to talk about a competency and a characteristic, if you're a leader and you don't have this, what we're talking about, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle being successful.
And I'm sure Chaz has seen some of that movie too.
Well, this rule of three is actually, I've never been able to articulate it. What you're describing, Cap, is something that I needed to pay more attention to. I have multiple recruiters. I've been fired by recruiters because I'm too picky. I take too long. The message from the recruiter always is, you got to hire fast. In this, it's always this market. I'm like, what's this market? Well, it's always this market, but no one can tell me what the market is. But you got to hire this person faster. They're gone. I'm like, well, so be it. I'll take that risk, right? Because making the wrong decision.
Cap is really saying is, just like you ask your AEs to build pipeline, as any leader out there has to build pipeline of potential reps that they're going to hire in their territories. And if you're not, and who do you do that with? You do that with the not employed players. You get on LinkedIn, you look at somebody, you say, hey, I'm going to be in town in Chicago on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I heard you're a great rep. This is not a recruiting call, but I network throughout the Chicago area. Would you mind it if I bought you a coffee or a beer and just get to know you? You get to know me. That's all you got to do. Now you know a lot more about that person, and you do that over the course of time until you got an opening in Chicago.
Yeah, it's lost. It's lost art. It's a lost art, Johnny. The other thing on recruiters, Chaz, that they put a lot of pressure on us, right? When they're like, hey, it's a tough market. You got to get back to this guy, blah, blah, blah. Well, I bring it to them too. And I'm like, because Chaz, you do such a good job on having these characteristics and they're measurable. I call it the highlighter test. When a recruiter calls me and says, hey, you gotta see this person. I'm like, why? And you better be using my language, not a bunch of resumes saying, stop me when you see something you like. I don't want to hear that. I want to say, based upon our profile, why do I need to interview this person? And I think that's a great place to start. And then the second thing is, I find companies that are out supporting us. We're leaders inside of companies and that are out supporting us. We are so slow. So the recruiters are right on some things. We are so slow in our internal processes. We've got a profile. We've gone through the interviews. We've ranked. We hire the freaking people. It's like what drives me nuts is you'll find somebody and they'll fit the profile. It's like I had somebody tell me the other day, N or N+1. It's like N means you know them personally, or N+1, you know somebody who knows them personally. You've done your due diligence. And now the CFO or somebody inside the company is going, hey, let's wait 2 weeks before this or 3 weeks or whatever. That drives me nuts. That's a company that just doesn't get how to acquire talent. Does that make sense to you? So it's both ways.
Yes. They can turn a candidate off.
You can't get an offer letter out for 3 weeks.
That's what I used to think. Talk about an audition. How long it takes you to get an offer letter out after you told the candidate they have their job is an audition for what it's like to work in that company.
Amen.
I used to swear by that.
Yes.
Sometimes when I wanted somebody, if they were sitting in my office, I literally would say, do you have a minute? I got to go to the restroom. I wasn't going to the restroom. I went down to HR and told them to print out the offer letter. I brought the offer letter back and put it on the desk.
Yeah.
So you ready to sign it? No. Well, why not? I got to talk to my wife. I go, great, let's call her.
Yeah.
Let's get it done.
The phone and called her.
Show me a company that can get an offer letter out in one day today. Yeah. And I'll tell you, it's a freaking unicorn. People just, they forget. Like, we're asking these candidates to be a walking audition, but as companies, we're not a walking audition for bringing talent in.
I think 48 hours with the contingency in there, because you got to do some other stuff behind the scenes with HR. Put a little contingency in there. But I completely agree with this wholeheartedly that you want to get, it does set the tone, John. You've got to get that out right. If you're really serious about the candidate and they've taken the time to do all the work that you asked them to do, and then they crush it, and then you wait and wait and wait, poof, They don't want to work for you.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I call you up because I need help in a deal, and then you wait 3 days to respond to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What message is that sending?
Yeah. Now, Chaz, what about, we talked a lot about traits. What about skills and knowledge? Are there certain skills, like top couple skills or top areas of knowledge that you have to have in a rep?
Oh, absolutely.
You want to talk about any of those?
Yeah, let's talk about some of those skills. And
All right.
a large enterprise play, separating from PLG, I think they're very different.
Yeah.
And everything that I want to share on this topic is having to do with large enterprise sales. Number one is communication, whether it's written, verbal, Zoom, or in-person presence. You have to be an excellent communicator. You have to love your craft. You have to practice and practice and practice. You have to take, yes, certainly in the early stages, take as many meetings as you can get. Let's just stretch our legs. Let's make sure that we've got our messaging down. We're ready for objections. We're ready for the competition. We're ready for, well, I'm not sure this is really the right fit. Like all of those things, all wrapped up in communication. And that presents itself in many stages during the interview process, but communication's a big one. And then I don't know how many you want. Is it the top 3 or the 20?
That's one big one, actually, because people have to be, as Johnny would call it, audible ready on a lot of those things. The top 10 most common objections, the elevator pitch, all of those things factor into being audible ready when, it's almost like you don't have, I always used to say, if you have to think, then you don't know. So there's a certain core of knowledge that you have to basically have where I can wake you up at 2:30 in the morning and ask you these 10 things and you just rattle them off because you don't have to think. If you have to think, then to your point, you're not really communicating yet, because to be a really great salesperson, you not only have to hear what somebody's saying, you have to basically truly understand by listening effectively, right? And if there's core things that you should know without thinking, then it allows you to sit there and really be part of the conversation with the customer.
Yeah, I started jotting down these skills and I'll come to it, but listening was one of them. The second one, that again, not in a stack rank, you have to be a lead. You have to have leadership skills. You have to lead the opportunity. You have to lead the company. Like if you're doing a 6-7 figure deal, the large Fortune 500, you better be able to lead that opportunity and everything that's associated with it. You better be able to lead the engineer that's working on the feature request that customer is, or rather that prospect is requesting. You have to be able to lead me. Like, hey, Chaz, I need you on this call next Tuesday at 3 p.m. This is what you're going to say. This is what you're not going to say. These are all the things you need to know. Here's the gap. I ran the diagnostic tool. Thank you very much for MedPick. I ran it. Here's where we're at. Like, you've got to lead it. You absolutely have to lead it. And that also means you've got to be able to manage the opportunity, manage the project. Like, we can rely on the prospect's project manager. That's okay. We're taking on this big project. It's funded. These are all the people that got to be involved. They have a project manager. Well, we need one too, right? And you as the seller need to be able to handle the load, right? There could be 20 different decision makers on a large enterprise deal. And I really meet that. I've seen that and I believe it happens all the time. You better discover who your dark horses and all of that. So you have to have management. You have to be a manager, more or less.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever skills are applied to someone in our position has to be visible and mastered in a large enterprise sale with an AE. Listening. Listening, okay, I'm not just waiting for my turn to talk. I don't know what movie that was. There's some great line in some movie in there. But are you taking the notes? Are you writing it down? Right? Sure, we got gong recordings and it's awesome. And I can use AI and get a nice succinct message to shoot right back to the prospect that captures all of that. I agree. That's very handy and we should be using that. But if I'm going to learn something, I got to write it down. Right? I'm old school and old. So I write everything down. Like, I want to know. So are you listening? Are you a great manager? Do you lead? Are you the quarterback? We've all talked about that in deals. Are you quarterbacking the deal? Maybe that's all of it wrapped up into one skill set. Are you a great quarterback of your opportunities? Objection handling certainly is important. Negotiation, like you're talking to a champion and things are going great. And the next thing you know, you're in procurement and they don't like you. They don't care about you. Their incentive to grind you and beat you down to a pulp. You handle that pressure. Do you have the skill, the experience to deal with that? Are you intimidated by numbers or not? Like, it's a long list, John.
No.
I like the character traits first because I do believe that with many of the skills, if you have the right experience on your team and you hired a diverse team in terms of skills and traits, we can help each other out.
Right.
We get on a sales call. This is what I learned. I tried this. Maybe I can teach you this skill to be better equipped for that time when it's going to come, because it's coming. So let's get ready for it.
See, I think, if they have the brains, they're going to pick up the knowledge that you give them. And if they have the drive, sometimes I call it a PhD, persistence, heart, and desire, then they're going to gain the skills that you need, because skills are gained over time. If I want to be a great dartboard thrower, I'm going to have to commit to throwing a dart 1,000 times a day. And if I'm not committed to developing that skill by doing a lot of repetitions, which is drive, I'm just never going to pick up that skill. I'm never going to master it. I'll be okay at it, but I'll never master it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I like to go to one level a little bit deeper, because I think I get asked this all the time about knowledge and skills. And for me, I call it a company responsibility. The company has a responsibility to provide this knowledge. And I call them the answers to the 4 essential questions. What problems do we solve for our customers? Number 1. Number 2, how specifically do we solve those? Number 3, how do we do it differently or better than anybody else? That's our differentiation. Number 4, where have we done it before? Case studies, proof points, testimonials. That's the knowledge that every company has a responsibility to bring to a sales organization. Now, the sales organization has the responsibility to apply that knowledge to create skill. And here are the top 3 that I see right now. And these are really, really sticking out for me. Number 1 skill that I see in enterprise sales right now is, and again, I'm just going one granular level lower than what we were talking about, attaching to the biggest business issue facing your customer. So no matter what you're doing, you've got the ability to attach your technical requirements to business outcomes. And that's a skill. Different people are involved. Different conversations are involved. That's a skill that can be taught. Number 2.
And Johnny, let me just add to that. The only way you get there goes to what Chad said. You have to be an amazing listener and a fantastic questioner.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how you're going to gain that knowledge to attach yourself to the biggest business problem that your company's product can handle.
It's where they all come together, for sure. Yeah. Another one is influencing decision criteria with your company's differentiation. Mm-hmm. You want to teach people how to win? Influence the customer decision criteria to make it their idea, the customer's idea, and influence it with your differentiation. That's a home run. It's a critical skill. And
again, that goes back to who's going to control the deal. The person that controls the criteria, the decision criteria, controls the deal. So if you can control it, either the customer can be in control, you're in control, the competition's in control. So if you're in control because you're defining the criteria, the other 2 are out of control. And the longer that a deal goes on, usually in the beginning, the customer's in control because they have the information that you need. But an effective questioning and listening AE can gather enough of that information, start to tie their differentiators to it. And now they are in control because now the customer says, that's interesting. Now they need information from you. Like, well, how does that work? How do we prove that? Who else answers your question? Like, who else has done this before? And that's when the rep is in control.
You got it. And then the 3rd skill, which is wrapped up in everything, John, I'm trying to give you these things that you can actually put down on paper, you can test for, you can develop to, you can coach and develop, you can recruit for it. And the 3rd one is you have to be a voracious qualifier. That's a skill. And if you're not dealing with medic, I don't care, you're dealing with some type of qualification criteria, but your skill is not only to learn the knowledge of that, but how do you apply it into qualification of opportunities so you can accurately predict your number. And those three are a home run. Like right now, those are the top three skills. If I'm listening to this and somebody asks me, what are the top three skills for enterprise selling? What am I testing for? What am I interviewing for? What am I looking for to promote people, to make them leaders? It's those three. I think they're really, really critical.
And that last one, and then Chaz, you love to hear what you think too. That last one, though, goes to everything that you do. Meaning, I used to always ask myself, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I talking to this person? Why am I over here talking to this department? Why am I doing what I'm doing? So that goes for any leader, whether you're internal or externally, talking to people. Why are you doing what you're doing? And it goes to deals. It goes to managing your time. It goes to pipeline. It goes to qualification. It goes to everything. You got to constantly ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing?
That qualification component of that skill set is actually, when you look at, managing a pipeline, of course, what deals should I be working on and what deals should I not be working on? Or should I abandon for that matter?
Right.
Qualify out. But when you started to share those thoughts, John, what came to mind for me was something that someone had said to me many, many years ago. And that was, if it's important to the customer, it's important to me, and it should be important to us. Mm-hmm. And that statement has stuck with me for 15 years when that person said that. And that's my qualification mechanism. Who is my customer, whether it's a prospect or somebody internally? What's important to them? And do I have alignment with it? And does it make sense for the business? So I have my own qualification process. On a deal, I almost want to say it's pretty easy to qualify a deal in or out. I mean, maybe it's because I've been doing it for so long, but on all the other aspects in working with different departments in the company, I have to apply some sort of qualification mechanism to it. Is this something I should be spending my time on? And it's a really good point, because as a leader in an early stage company, you're pulled in 1,000 directions. Everyone wants a little piece of you.
Yes.
I need you in this meeting. I need you in that meeting. And you have to decide, which ones do I opt out of? Which ones do I go all in on? Or which ones do I have someone participate in my place? There's this whole chain of events that goes around the qualification of what is important and not important, at least as a sales organization and a sales leader. And Cap, I love your skill set. I love that breakdown of those three skill sets. And I'm thinking, I went too high level with John, but I still believe all of those things are critical. And I love the drill down and going a little bit more specific on what's actually needed. And I concur. These are excellent ones. And qualification. Well, I think it was even you that said it a long time ago, John. Are we uniquely qualified to solve the problem? If we're not uniquely qualified, let's move on.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Good. Really strong.
I like what you just said, Chaz, when you said, if it's important to the customer, it's important to us. And I call that that's one of the character traits, I think, is it's an outside in mentality.
Yes.
Meaning not an inside out mentality. It's an outside in, meaning that I know that I exist because there's somebody out there that has a problem or a pain, that if I can make it big enough and I can relate it to my solutions to that problem in a way that creates urgency and creates, a multiplying effect, that's as old as dirt. And you can tell whether people have an outside in mentality or not. If they're great listeners, they ask great questions, it just manifests itself. I actually think about companies. If I'm out there listening to this podcast and I'm interviewing for a company and I'm thinking about going to a company, I can judge their outside in mentality just in how they deal with me. Because in this instance, I'm the customer for them. I could be the customer for them. And so anyways, I like that. It's outside in mentality. You're patient, hold, here's the problem. Here comes my solution. They get it messed up.
I wish it was my line. It isn't. I stole it from CD.
Carlos. I
don't even remember saying it to me, but he said it so long ago, and it completely changed how I thought about being a seller. It takes you from me to them.
Yes.
And the prospect will pick up on that instantly. When they tell that you're there for them and you are their champion at your business, it's super powerful. And I love using it. I think about it in every meeting. Okay, what would Bob say from our customer? Would he agree that this is the right direction for us to be going in? Anyway, I'm digressing. But qualification, I mean, it's
that. There's another way to say that too, which I really like, is you have to first make it all about them before you earn the right to make it all about you. And in a selling relationship, there is a point in time where you earn the right to make it all about you. You're going to have your time to make it all about you, and you better be ready to do it. But in the beginning, it's about making about them first. And that goes back, it's human behavior. It's not sales. It's just human behavior.
And when that happens, the deal actually goes from what I call from unpredictable steps. You don't know what's going to happen when you make this sales call. Then all of a sudden you're in control, got a good champion. And now you know what's going to happen next. So the deal has gone from unpredictable to predictable.
Yeah.
And that's when you're in control, and that's when things change.
It's a term we use internally, Cap, a lot. Have you earned the right to make that ask? And in today's call, we were talking about outbound. And we're talking about the BDR, SDR motion. What are we doing? Are you asking for something? Have you earned the right to even ask for it?
Yeah.
I better not get a message from someone I don't know. Here, Chaz, why don't you just throw 15 minutes on my calendar and we can talk?
Yeah.
A pound sand moment. Sorry, delete. I'm not interested. Now, if you bring something to me that I can learn from or about for a problem I'm trying to solve or probably deal with, you know what? I'm going to read that message, and I might take that meeting, or I might set up that meeting. So, earning the right. I love that. So, yeah.
Good. That was a good conversation, guys. Really appreciate it. Chaz MacLaughlin, thank you, man.
My pleasure.
Chaz,
enjoyed it.
Tons, buddy. That's a great topic. I know we covered a lot in the ocean there, but I think that it's great timing, and I think that's a huge value add for leaders and for interviewers and interviewees that are listening. I think that was gold.
Yeah, it was awesome. I really appreciate it. The perspective you guys bring to the table is super powerful, and all of us that listen to that podcast are super thankful for it. Because in the myriad ocean of information that just gets dumped on you, and you're tempted to read it, and you're like, oh, but maybe I should do that. You really have to step back and look at the presenters and say, who are they? Where did they come from? What's their track record? Can I trust them? And that's what you guys have brought to the table. It's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Chaz.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to check us out at forcemanagement.com.